The Rough Drafts podcast is sponsored by Unicorn.com, the world's premier esports betting site. Bet on your favorite games like CSGO, Dota 2, and League of Legends, and earn Unicoins through successful bets, or use Unicorn's exclusive Connect program, where you can earn Unicoins just by playing some of your favorite games. Use your earnings to enter Unicorn's raffles for exciting prizes like Logitech peripherals or CSGO skins. So join Chase and Walter and prove who really is the esports gambling expert. Unicorn.com. Log on today. Hello, Internet. This is Walter, Ceades, Fedczuk, welcoming you back to Day 3 of our 2017 European Spring Split Team-by-Team Preview. We've already covered 2 teams in North America, TSM and Team Dignitas, and we've covered 2 teams in Europe, Fnatic and the unstoppable 2016 European champions, G2 Esports. And today, joining me, as always, my co-host and good friend, Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar, for probably one of the more interesting roster moves of the offseason. Chase, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Interesting is the right word to use. I think if you had given me 1,000 guesses as to what H2k's roster would look like when the next season rolled around, I never would have come up with something resembling this roster. Certainly the 2 Koreans that have come in are interesting choices, and I don't know. We're going to see what happens. This is an organization that has consistently done well since they've entered the league, and I'm excited to see how this comes together and what they've seen that has led them to make the moves that they've made.
We're gonna say interesting a lot. That's the buzzword for this podcast, and I apologize for those of you who don't like alliteration, but it's interesting. So yes, we are in fact talking about H2k-Gaming, which I learned in the last 6 months stands for Hard to Kill.
Yeah.
Which is that's such a Call of Duty clan name. It's kind of cool.
Well,
I
that's
like
how
it.
it started, right?
Yeah. They were a console. Yeah, they were a console organization. I just like that. Hard to Kill. Unfortunately, for some of the members of this team last year, they were not, in fact, hard to kill, leading them to a 4th place regular season finish with a win, tie, loss record of 7-6-5. They finally were able to actually win a couple series in the playoffs and win a couple series for their AD carry at the time, Febiven. They took 3rd place in the summer playoffs, qualifying them for the 2016 World Championship, where they were the 2nd largest stunner of the World Championship, making it all the way to the semifinal before they lost 3-1 against Samsung Galaxy. We were there! 3-0. 3-0. Yeah, 3-0. I'm bad at this.
I have the pictures on my phone of the candlelight vigil we held for the West Hopes after
3-0
that series.
Yeah.
So I remember very well the complete lack of hope or optimism that existed in the Madison Square Garden when that series went down. But
they had 2 All-Pro players too, 2 third-team All-Pro players in Yankos and Vander. I kind of think Ottawamne got snubbed a little bit. When I go back and actually look at it, I think he may have been snubbed. And speaking of Ottawamne, he returns as their top laner. Jankos returns at their jungler, and this is where things get interesting. Their mid laner Ryu has left for the warmer pastures of California, and he looks to rise from the ashes of kind of disappointing Worlds performance, especially in the semifinal. He was a little lackluster. He was a little burnt out, it seems. He's been replaced by an H2k favorite, Febiven. He's back. He's finally on the team that he took to the LCS and then left for Fnatic. The 80 carries Forgiven and Freeze are gone to who knows where. they just kind of disappeared into the clouds, and they've been replaced by Nuclear, the former AD carry of Spenu, and your old friend from Rocket Vander. He has now been replaced by the former Jin air support, Che, and as always, they are head coached and the captain of the ship, Prawley, one of my favorite European, North American exports. He's not, in fact, European. He is the head coach in Europe. So, Chase, I know I hammered you a couple of times there with a couple little body shots, but where do you land on this roster other than interesting?
Well, first of all, shout-outs to Prawley, because someone has to teach Europe what actual barbecue tastes like. So you got to keep the Southern hope alive, Prawley. I will always appreciate you for that.
Amen.
Fun fact about Odoamne, because I was looking it up when you said snub. How many times do you think he was a player of the game last split, Walter, if you had to take a guess? In the summer split. Note that the most any individual player got was 9.
7.
1. So maybe Odoamne wasn't an all-pro.
Maybe not. But okay, fair enough.
You still have to take into account the guy, when he's at his best, he has played to an incredibly high level of play. He has been a top-tier top laner in Europe for a while now, and has been able to really use teleports in particular in order to help set up the rest of his teammates for those kinds of team fights. And Yankos has been absolutely astounding. So the core is there. The changes are what I find fascinating. And, Febiven is... You can't laugh every time I come up with a synonym for interesting. This is going to be too long. I like having Febiven back. I love the idea of the prodigal son returning home after a mixed bag of a split.
To replace his angry father. Yeah, I understand that completely.
Yeah, no, it needs to be done. The question mark really is going to be around these Korean imports, which we'll go into more detail later. But honestly, it's a blend of core guys that we can depend upon and we know exactly what they are and what we can expect, and new guys who are being taken out of their element, and we have to see how the pieces fit in this new area. And that's going to be the fun part, I think, when you look at how H2k eventually breaks down.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right on that, and I want to land on Febiven here. That's who I want to talk about this, because you're excited about it. That's what we have on our show notes. You're excited about Febiven.
I like Febiven.
Well, and if you listen to the G2 podcast episode, which if you haven't, pause it now. Go listen to that right now so you hear this line, so you know exactly what I'm referencing.
I'm gonna point, and he's gonna put an annotation there. And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'll put an annotation there, sure. Yeah. And he is the second member of the self-help European mid laners, guys who reading a whole bunch of self-help books. And there was even a moment where people were like afraid he was joining the cult of some streamer because he's been like this huge like self-help. Listen to me, I know I'm gonna be your life coach. I'm gonna teach you how to do things. Like jokingly, fine, like whatever. But he just had a very off season with Fnatic. Just totally, you talked about Ceades being checked out on the Fnatic episode. Febiven looked completely checked out for Fnatic last split. So why on earth are you excited about this guy?
Well, it's funny when you say checked out, right? Because a checked out split for Febiven still involves a 4.1 KDA, a 67.7% kill participation, decent damage per minute numbers, being accountable for 27% of his team's damage. The guy still played well. He was not the problem with that Fnatic team. I mean, obviously, there were a lot of issues that we'll never quite know. We won't know why Daylor left or everything that ended up going wrong. But if ever there's a case that change of scenery guy is ready to go, it's with Febiven. This is a guy who has been consistently very good, even at his worst, and he has had streaks of greatness during his time at H2k. I mean, during his time at Fnatic. And Season 5 Worlds showed how good he can be. He has proven himself at an international level before. So we know that
the MSI beforehand, solo killing Faker. Yeah. Like, I'm on board with that.
He's made incredible plays. And the guy, sure, maybe you could say it wasn't his best split last split, but it certainly wasn't a poor one. And it's hard to expect him to have done much better than that given the state that Fnatic was in. So now you're putting him with an organization that has been incredibly solid, that just proved that they can put these pieces together and make a real run at Worlds, making it all the way to the semifinals. Say what you will about the group, say what you will about Albus Nox. They still made it to the semifinals of Worlds. There are only 3 other teams that did that. So there you go on that end.
That's true.
They have, you know, if you're looking at how, you know, what kind of piece do you want to add to a core? Well, why don't we add a guy who knows how to make plays and who has experience being a primary carry at his time at Fnatic, being a secondary carry during his time at Fnatic, depending on which iteration of the roster that he was, you know, that was going on at that time. There's some versatility that he brings, and it's so nice when you have a meta in which getting ganks into the mid lane is so important to, as far as setting up the mid laners for how they're going to play for the rest of the game. Well, man, if only they had the best ganker in the entirety of the region, you know, this first blood king over there who could set him up and put him in a place to succeed. I like the pairing of Febiven with Yankos so much. I love his potential to really get back into the form that we saw him at when he was at his best. I have very high hopes for him this split.
You know, I get it. I can see that it does seem like he's a really good change of scenery guy. He has history with the H2k organization, though not necessarily 3 of the players that are on it, but him and Odoamne back when they were in the challenger scene, and they were Cloud9 Eclipse, I think was the European name at the time. They were very strong. Their solo lanes were fantastic. They were very strong. They really played off of each other well. They really roamed well together. He was a fantastic assassin player, Lissandra player, you know, all these kinds of things. I'm just, the self-help stuff, the attitude stuff, the tiff that him and Reckless got into Forgiven, it just seemed like he regressed just as a person last split. And I don't know, that's kind of harsh. Like, how dare you judge this person that lives on the other side of the world and you don't know, but just persona out wide, it just seemed weird. It didn't seem like the youngster that was very quiet and reserved and, you know, had solo killed Faker and was like, you know, under Papa Daylor and was, you know, very controlled. It just seemed very off, and he's the guy that I'm actually nervous for when I look at H2K. But you're nervous about a different lane. The entire lane. 2 players, in fact. Chase, the Korean imports.
I don't like any of this. I don't... Why? What? Why? I just, you know, I looked at H2K and I'm like, look, Forgiven probably not going to be playing. He's still got his Greek military service going on, but, you know, Freeze, if he's healthy, is going to be there, and they've got Vander, and Vander is such a strong piece. As you said, he was one of 2 players to be an all-pro for this team last split. And he was the reason that the bot lane was as strong as it was. Say what you will about Forgiven. He is a great player mechanically and has been so at different points in his career. But he was coming off of a lot of rust after, you know, a bad first week on Origin, quitting for a little bit, and then being brought back in and having to be worked into this H2K system. It was Vander that made his life so much easier for him. That's all gone. And what we're left with is Nuclear, who was the AD carry for Spenu, who I don't know what to say.
They weren't great.
He's fine if at his best. I mean, the guy leans on Lucian like nothing else. He had 16 games on Lucian in the LCK Spring. We don't have the full stats for his challenger time because Spenu was immediately relegated. Turns out that Nuclear wasn't that great of an AD carry when it came down to some of those relegation matches. And he really struggled on things that required him to be a hard carry style of player, which is fine as long as you have a support that helps enable plays then. Okay, well, let's get, you know, something like an Alistar or a Braum that can set him up and get him in a position to really succeed, land the skill shots that he wants. Except the problem is that Che is really bad at that. His Alistar was 2-8 last split. His Braum was 2-5. He doesn't play those kinds of champions very well. He is much more of an aggressive laner. He wants to start, you know, playing things like Bard and getting the stuns out right away, or he wants to get Thresh hooks, or he wants to go all in on Trundle. That was his best champion by far. If you include things like the regional finals in which they played. So it's kind of a mismatch of identities. You've got a guy who is very, who prefers range, who prefers to use spells, who likes to peek in the mid to late game versus, paired with a guy in Che who is all about, setting up these kind of lane advantages early on and getting these, trying to get early leads for them. This worries me. This feels like two players who are not really meant to play together. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's, Nuclear, like I said, the Korean Challenger stuff is hard to track down, but when I've looked through, his win record was great. He did well in the promotion tournament as an individual on things like the Jin worked out all right for him. He can play Sivir, so certainly some of the things we've seen in this meta he can do. But is Che going to be able to play the supports that match him when he's going on that style? I'm not sure. Is Nuclear going to be able to adjust to the way that Che likes to play the lane? I'm not sure. And that to me is incredibly concerning, especially because they're taking on a language barrier to do this, right? This isn't like Ryu, who's been on a team for a while and we know exactly where his English is. The bot lane might have problems communicating. We're not sure yet. And so there are all these question marks surrounding how Nuclear and Che are going to fit together, how skilled they are individually when you look at them as the pieces, and whether or not the meta shifts are going to be able to just take these guys out. I am concerned. I don't know. I think there are too many questions and not enough answers for me to feel comfortable.
Totally 100% fair. I remember very little of Nuclear other that in the spring he was sort of being talked up as like a good young player that could potentially break out. One of those kind of guys where he would have a decent season on a mediocre team, and you might see him then join a CJ Entis, Rocks, and SKT, Longzhu, like someone else, and then he'll split time with a better AD carry, and he'll be a young guy and kind of learn up. That never happened. He stayed with Speno when they went to Challenger, and I have the unfortunate pleasure of being a Jin Air Green Wings fan in Korea, because that was just, I liked the plane. I thought it was cool. Like, I liked the bomber jackets. Like, I didn't want
plane.jpg, man. I'm all in.
It is. It's sad plane.jpg. It's just straight up. I didn't want to pick SKT because, like, oh, then you're like, it was kind of like after Taipei Assassins won, like, everyone was a Taipei Assassins fan from the LMS. Like, I didn't want to be, like, I want to be kind of hipstery about my Korean League of Legends. You're right. Che is terrible on melee support champions. He's awful. He has terrible positioning, terrible decision-making. He eats skill shots for breakfast. He takes damage from opposing AD carries and trades like it's nothing. It's pretty bad on his melee support champions. He is pretty fantastic at the Bard. He is pretty good at the ranged, harassy kind of supports. Zyra's still very in vogue. Karma's still very in vogue. Those kind of champions are still in vogue. His Thresh is actually pretty good if you go a little bit back, past summer, past spring, like a little farther back in his career. He's been an okay Thresh player, which is starting to crop up because he kind of takes advantage of things like Zyra and whatnot, and you just kind of kill him. So as players, they have some potential, but I do think it does come down to the play style of can they mix and match, which it really depends. Lucian and Sivir and Jin are short-range AD carries, and they really have to step up quite a ways to trade when you're playing like something like a Karma or a Zyra. You really are focusing your support completely on trading and hoping that your AD carry positions himself appropriately. And then, like you said, that language barrier, we don't know. We don't know. And in Yankos, I love the guy. He does speak English, but sometimes it can be hard to understand his English because he has a very, very thick Polish accent. And I love it about him. It's unique. And Chase, he is your X factor for this team. And the First Blood King is back. Like, you don't have to sell me on this, but if I don't believe in him, sell me on him. Tell Yankos.
If you don't believe in Yankos, here's the only stat you need to know. The guy had a 45% First Blood rate despite 49% First Blood rate, after a sample size of 37 games. That is insanity. That involves, by the way, the enemy team getting First Blood or anyone else on his team getting First Blood without him involved. 49%!
He's
the
back,
guy
baby.
is an incredible playmaker. And by the way, it was even better at Worlds, where he had a 62% first blood rate, just constantly roaming around the map, playing these aggressive junglers, setting his teammates up for success. And they're going to need it, because while this bot lane is figuring itself out, and certainly Che has enough experience and Nuclear has enough potential where it could figure itself out, until then, they need to count on their solo laners, the guys who have been the core of this team, as far as how they've played around the map. It's not Ryu, it's Febiven, but I think the idea is still the same. You want to get your mid laner to scale up nicely. You want to get Odoamne in a place where he feels comfortable so he can start teleporting in and initiating fights, really helping the team fight phase, which is when H2k tends to shine. And Jankos is the guy to do that. It is going to be up to him to really focus on getting those lanes ahead and giving them the resources they need to succeed if they're going to be able to be a top tier team. And some of that's also going to involve making sure that the language barrier does come down, because he is a shot caller. And while I'm not going to say that he has a unique accent, because, the entire country of Poland exists, I'm going to say that it's not necessarily the easiest thing for Koreans to understand. And it's going to be difficult to see, maybe make those early ganks work out. So it's going to be up to Yankos to make the plays happen, to find the holes in the enemy's defenses, to find the holes in the enemy's vision, and really get to work. And if he can do that, and he can do it consistently, and at the same level that he did last split, they're going to be in a pretty great place. The question is, can he keep it up? Because, as I said, 49% first blood rate over a full season is insanity. If he took a full 10 percentage point drop off, it would be entirely reasonable, and it would still be probably the best in the league at that kind of game rate. So can he keep it up at that clip? It's almost impossible for him to do so. And if he takes a step back, that's going to put more pressure on Febiven and Odoamne as this bot lane gets figured out. But if he keeps playing like he did at Worlds, man, anything is possible. This team could reach some pretty incredible ceilings.
I think it's actually incredibly important for this H2k roster for Jankos to continue to play. Not nearly at such a mind-numbingly insane level, but he needs to be, arguably the best jungler in Europe. And when you start talking about best junglers in the world, your top 8, 10, whatever, Jankos' name has got to stay up there if H2k wants to succeed. Because in his recent Dunzo manifesto, Forgiven, he does this. He's kind of a jerk, and he rips everyone a new one and says, oh, it's not my fault, it was this fault, it was this, whatever. But he does make this point of teams do tend to struggle after Forgiven leaves, because they are so Forgiven dependent in their identity that it takes a little while for them to adjust away. Even H2k had problems with this at the beginning of the summer split after he disappeared. And bringing in someone like Freeze probably helped, because he does have a semi-similar playstyle where he's very resourced and very, wants everyone to focus on him, on his team, and get him ahead. And I think that's a really important thing for H2k is they need to, break that as quickly as possible and find their new identity. And I think you saw the start of that at the end of the World Championship, the games against Albus Max Luna, and even the games against Samsung, where Jankos played exceptionally well and was playing honestly above his expectation going into the World Championship. So if he can keep it at that high level, I think they're going to be a pretty good team. I think they're going to be playoff bound. I do think that they're probably in that 3rd, 4th place match again. I think they make it to the semifinals, but I don't know if with this roster they're quite good enough to actually contend for a title. Chase, what do you think?
I think it's all going to depend on how that bot lane works out. I think if Nuclear and Che live up to the hype that H2k are throwing around them, this is going to be a potential top 2 team. They have the ability to do that with the pieces that they have. However, I've watched enough Che. He's played long enough at Jenner. We know who he is. I don't see the upside that some analysts are pointing out. I think he plays very well on ranged supports, doesn't play well on melee supports. I don't think anything has happened between when he left Jenner and when he signed here that is going to change that. And Nuclear, to not live up to the hype, last split. I think that is safe to say. That Spenu team was poison. I'm not sure, it's not quite at the are they bad or are they just an IM style of terrible that they've brought out. But look, I need to see him do it against real talent when he has players surrounding him and there are no excuses that someone else screwed this up for him. I need to see it. So I have them in that 3rd to 4th place match as well. I think that that's the logical kind of end point. I think Yankos and Febiven and Odoamne are too good of a core to not get there. But I think that they're just going to be held back by the spotlight until they take the time to really sort it out. And we'll see going into the summer whether they feel good about improving upon that base or whether they're regretting letting go of one of their 2 all-pro players at the very late in the offseason.
Hey, you know what? If Jankos continues to play at that insane level, I think the sky is honestly the limit, and they could possibly challenge G2. I think that's very accurate. That's going to do it for us. That is day 3 wrapped up. We've covered, like we said, we covered Fnatic, we covered TSM, we've covered G2, we've covered Dignitas, we covered Cloud9 over on the NA podcast. If you want to just go ahead and hit next in the playlist and go listen to that. As always, you can follow myself at Ceades_LOL. Chase, where can the good folks at home find you?
You can find me at RedShirtKing. Can't wait to hear what you guys think about that Korean bot lane. That's really the exciting part of how this team fits together, and I'm sure that there are some Korean experts that would love to let me know about some of the things I missed about Nuclear's Challenger games. So please, by all means, I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Come back tomorrow where we're going to cover one more NA team and we're going to cover another European team. And Chase, I don't know about you, but I think since the acquisition of a certain Korean jungler, this team, they probably aren't living like renegades anymore. So until next time, Internet, goodbye. Hey there, Ceades here. Thanks for checking out the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/roughdraftspod. For just $1 a month, you can join your fellow listeners in our patron-only Discord channel and help keep the content coming, or join our VIP club where $1 a show or $8 a month gets you first priority on all patron content like our patron-only Q&As. And check us out on all of our social media, Twitter @RoughDraftsPod, Facebook.com/RoughDraftsPod, SoundCloud.com/esportsroughdrafts, as well as on iTunes and YouTube by just searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.